Welcome to the Unlocked Human Podcast. Unlocking Human Potential. The podcast about healing, health, wellness, motivation, and the mindset of healing. Now, here is your host, sports chiropractor, Dr. Josh Jagoda.
Hey guys, Dr. Josh Jagoda here. Welcome to episode number 3. I believe this is going to be number 3 for this week of the Unlocked Human Podcast. And today we're going to talk a little bit more about soft tissue work. And this is something that I've been doing pretty extensively for pretty much the last 8, 9, 10 years. It's something that I gravitated towards very much so in my career. I still continue to do a lot of it, and I've made a lot of mistakes. And so the reason I am going to talk about this is because not only did I make a lot of mistakes, so hopefully I can help other practitioners and people out there, but also as a patient, what you should be expecting when somebody is going to do soft tissue work, whether that would be a chiropractor, a physical therapist, maybe some sort of massage therapist, or any other, even a buddy at home. Like, if you want to dig an elbow into somebody, kind of, what does that mean? How does this work for you? And, what should you expect from a therapist or something like that? So, kind of getting started with soft tissue work was pretty easy for me because I took a lot of electives in chiropractic college. And I took a lot more electives on sports therapy type stuff. And so in the sports realm and the sports therapy field, what happens is that you kind of get exposed to rehab, you get exposed to taping, you get exposed to a lot of muscle work because a lot of athletes are going to have problems with their muscles and joints and also non-athletes, we all have joints and movement systems. So, we're taught how to do soft tissue work and stretching and things like that. So these are really important concepts and tips that I think are going to be really important for you guys out there. So I guess we'll start, I like to always say it, we'll start at the beginning, right? So it's hard to start at a certain point in time, but I would like to start off by talking about one of the most common things that I see with patients, and that's patients will come in and be like, do what you got to do, right? And if you have ever had pain and really wanted to get over this, you would probably say to the doc or to the therapist, just do what you got to do, right? Just make it happen. I don't care. I'll suck it up. And a lot of people will go hard and deep and really dig into the tissues to stimulate a change in those tissues. And what we're finding now is like that was wrong. And I wouldn't say now, but like we've known for a little while that is wrong, and we're really uncovering a lot more reasons why it is wrong. So the whole concept of harder is better, deeper is better, deep tissue massage is great for you is not necessarily as accurate as we once thought. And let's just start off also by saying that if you're a massage therapist or a chiropractor who does soft tissue like myself and rehab and stuff like that, it's not wrong to do soft tissue. Don't get me wrong at all. Like, it is great, and I still recommend patients go out there and get soft tissue work. It's just, what are the goals? What are you trying to accomplish with soft tissue work? And I think this is where a lot of the misconstruing and false things are out there, and people just think that you're breaking up scar tissue, and we'll talk about that today. So the whole concept of harder is better is false, and this is what we're talking about today. So I guess what we'll start with is really just talking about why patients may want harder is better, and really I think it just comes down to patients who are looking to get a result, and they're just like either motivated or they're just like, I'm in a lot of pain, I just don't care because, and I wouldn't say don't care, I'd just say they'd rather not be in pain. And I think we all rather not be in pain. And if you've ever had a tight muscle, sometimes pushing on it feels really good, but it's not always the most effective, and how come stretching the muscle isn't always effective, and how come it doesn't always yield the results that we want. And so when I was a first in practitioner, or first, in school, and, came out into the practitioner world, my main model of soft tissue work was Graston Technique. And if you don't know what Graston Technique is, it's an awesome technique. It's pretty much you use these stainless steel tools to scrape away the soft tissue, and a lot of people will say scar tissue. They also call it scraping. It's very similar to the gua sha tools, those jade or plastic tools that kind of, you put a little lubricant on the soft tissue, or oil on the skin, and you kind of scrape away at the soft tissue, and it creates like this red reaction. And we can dive a little bit into the science, but I don't really want to dive too much into it because I really want you guys to understand what's happening. But what we're thinking, or what we thought, is that we're breaking down scar tissue and we're promoting healing. And the whole concept of Graston, is really just, or I guess you can say any soft tissue, is really to stimulate healing again, right? And that's what we're trying to do, is to get the tissues to heal better than they once were. So Graston Technique has 6 stainless steel tools, and like, if you're listening to this right now, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, this stainless steel tool, like, he's going to use this metal rod on my back, and this is going to hurt a lot. And when I was first out into practice, about 10 years ago, there was this research paper that came out, and I actually just took another follow-up course on this, and so it kind of gave me that reminder. It said, we had inclinations and evidence to show or demonstrate that when you put a little bit more pressure into the soft tissue, that it elicited better healing capacities and blood flow to that area. So obviously blood flow is really good because it carries nutrients vital for restructuring the soft tissue. So the thought process was, hey, if we go a little harder, then that's where we can get the desired benefit. And so a lot of practitioners kind of took that and ran with it. And this is at the time where like Graston was really popular, and they still had their patent. And I think it was about 6-7 years ago, don't quote me on this, that they kind of started losing their patent, and a lot more soft tissue tools came out, and this kind of, a lot of people were like, okay, here it goes, like, let's go dig in really hard. So the ability for us to dig in harder was like, okay, that demonstrates a good benefit, let's keep doing that. So when I got out of chiropractic college, what I started to do was, hard. I went hard, and I felt like if I was kind of bruising up the tissue and going deep on that it would provide a lot of benefit. And so it did, but also there was a lot of drawbacks. So when you're scraping the skin with Graston Technique, what you're also doing is you're breaking down some sensitive blood vessels, and you're trying to stimulate a micro-inflammatory environment. What does that mean? That just means that you're controlling the amount of pain or discomfort or inflammation that is going to occur. And by controlling it and not doing too much, you're in theory a little bit more control, so that therefore you can actually stimulate the healing process rather than doing too much and hurting it. So what we did is we would kind of scrape at the skin, and it would feel really good for patients, but then they would break out in this thing called petechiae, and that's like popping of the blood vessels. And a lot of people love to see that, and a lot of people would be bruised, especially if you're on like, one of the contraindications for that, meaning you shouldn't do it, is like if you're on blood thinners and stuff like that. We won't get into that, but especially fair-skinned people, they will actually show a little bit more bruising. And so I felt like the more blood vessels I popped, and this is at the beginning, don't keep this in mind, guys, the more blood vessels I popped, even if they didn't bruise, I felt like I was doing my job. And people would feel better, and they would heal, and I felt like it was more effective than my hands-on treatment at the time. But that was it. And so now you have all these other techniques with other Graston tools, other other stainless steel tools. You have active release technique, myofascial release, rapid release, sound wave healing, all these cool things that are out there to help stimulate the tissues. And so the whole harder was not better, or deeper was better at the time, but now it's like we're learning that is totally not true. And we're going to talk a bit about why, and why I don't go harder. And a lot of patients like, whoa, how come he was so soft? How come he was so like gentle on the soft tissue work? And, just for an example, like the IT band, by the way, if you guys are rolling out the IT band, just stop. The IT band is really not even a muscle at all. It's just this deep, dense connective tissue that's attached to the side of the knee and runs up the lateral leg or the side of the leg. But it is not a muscle. But if you wanted to deform that, I believe I read a research paper recently as well on the same thing, that if you wanted to deform, meaning like change the shape of that tissue a little bit, like stretch it out a little bit, you're going to need about 1,400 pounds of force in order to deform or create some space about 1 millimeter for that, which is an absurd amount of pain, pressure, and discomfort for just 1 millimeter. And is that really going to help you anyway? So what we're finding is like, there's a few reasons why a patient is not going to get better if you push them harder, or if you hit them harder, if you dig their elbow into their back better. The first reason is that the site of pain is not always the site of dysfunction. So think about that, right? You might have pain into the upper back, like right around that area where you're having like scapular pain, that area where a lot of people have like, right in the rhomboid, they're always like, oh, my upper back, I think it's from sitting, that postural related thing. Yes, there is some posture related, but that's not just that site of pain is often confused with that site being a painful site rather than the site of actual dysfunction being taken up to its I guess consideration is a good word. And so when we look at people with their movement dysfunction or some sort of soft tissue work, a lot of the pain that we see into the upper shoulder and scapular area, they could be from neck, from nerve, but oftentimes it's from the inability of their neck to have stability. What does that mean? That means that the muscles within the neck, from sitting, from posture, from things like that, they're not firing properly. And as soon as you get those things to fire properly and start strengthening them up, the upper back muscles that also attach from the scapula to the neck don't have to work as hard. So the site of pain is not always the site of dysfunction or injury. And so we can actually go ahead and, yes, treat the pain, but the problem may come right back. So that is one reason why. It's just because we're not actually on the site of pain. Or we're not actually on the side of the injury, we're only on the side of pain. And yes, you do have to treat the pain sometimes. Sometimes people are in a lot of pain, you really just need to make them feel better. But right away, maybe that's what you need to do, but you have to tell them. And patients, if you're a patient right now and listening to this, that you might actually just be like, hey, I know this is in pain. Is this the actual problem site? A lot of patients don't care. They just want to feel better. So just treat that site, make them feel better, and then say, hey, just so you know, this is not the problem. Go from there. So, one, that is it. The site of pain is not always the problem site. One of the other things I like to discuss with my patients is when I go through soft tissue work with people, I want to make sure that I'm not hurting them more. And that would sound kind of obvious, right? It sounds like, well, of course you don't want to hurt people, right? You're in the profession to help them. Why would you want to hurt them? And I don't mean like hurt them, but I'm talking about a level of pain. So when I go through some soft tissue work, I never want my patients to have more than a 7 out of 10 of pain. And a lot of times people are like, well, I can take it, right? We talked about that before. I can take it. I'm like, well, I know you can take it, but that's not the goal. The goal is to help you move better and feel better. And sometimes yes, pushing harder on people makes them feel better, but it's not good for them. So why? So in our body, we have this thing called the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. You talk about two of them. We're talking about rest and repair. So rest and digest, rest and repair, whatever you guys want to call it, and sympathetic overload or fight or flight, right? And just for those of you who do not know this stuff, fight or flight is a chronic stress release. Chronic stress hormones are being released. And so that increases your heart rate, it affects your blood sugar, your blood pressure, and all that other stuff. Whereas rest and repair relaxes you and you're more on vacation mode, right? So when somebody's in pain, maybe they're stressed because they're in pain, maybe they're working a lot, maybe they have neck pain at work, and it's just compounding, especially in, the United States and a lot of Western states. We're always on the go. We have coffee in the morning, we drink at night, and we also have some other things going on. And so we end up realizing that, hey, this person's in chronic stress mode, they're in pain, they're still in chronic stress mode, and then I'm going to push on them and create more of that chronic stress or that acute stress to that chronic stress. And that doesn't help them. So what I like to tell people or patients in my office is, hey, we're going to work on you. We're going to do the soft tissue work. If you ever get to a 7 out of 10 or more, then I have to back off. And you have to be better at giving me that feedback. Because we want somebody to have a comfortable treatment so that they can get in that therapeutic activity. We want them to be therapeutic and resting and repairing, not chronic stress, because that constricts the blood vessels. That doesn't allow blood flow to help them. And even if it did, because of that pressure, then, as I talked about in that research article, then they're still releasing chronic stress hormones. So that doesn't help them. So in that paper that we were talking about, or in that Graston Technique refresher that I just took, we were talking about how you can actually create that inflammatory result, but without causing more discomfort to that patient. Which brings me to the next point, is if you're going too hard, guys, like if you are a therapist and you're a patient and one of your therapists is going too hard on you, then you have to start realizing that you're also possibly creating more soreness so that the patient cannot do their activity for the next day. What if they're a professional athlete? And I see a few of them here, and I see them and they're like, well, I have a major game in 2 days. I can't be sore. Like, tell that to anybody. Nobody wants to be sore the next day. They can take a little bit of soreness, but if you're creating major pain and inflammation, then you're also not only damaging them for performance-wise, but you're also creating an environment where you're possibly damaging healthy tissue as well. So take it, in my case, where I was the student, and I just got back into, chiropractic, in the first 2 years of my career, and I was like hammering on people. And, you see this also a lot on Instagram and like, YouTube and stuff like that. Mostly Instagram, I feel like, but I watch some of these new grads who are like, I guess you could say doing Graston or ART or anything on people, and they're literally like showing their battle wounds off. They're like, oh, look at how much I'm bruising, look at how much pain I just endured, that session was so intense. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing to these people? Like, you're hurting patients and your outcomes are not therapeutic. And I've gotten criticized as well for being too light, and it's really more just about the patient education and creating people and patients that are actually going to heal and heal properly. I personally rather have them heal a day or two slower, because they didn't get injured overnight. So then go too hard. And I shouldn't say that I said that the wrong way, sorry about that. I'd rather heal them faster but at a lesser intensity level and not risk hurting them for the future. There's also things like some medications like antibiotics, they can cause spontaneous tendon rupture. And I've seen that actually in a chiropractor who was taking antibiotics for something, and then he swung a racket and just boom, there goes his bicep ripped right off the bone. And same thing with some heavy lifters, and some of these heavy lifters and bodybuilders, and I'm not just going to say them, but other people in general, like you have to watch out, because sometimes they may be taking some illegal or substances. So it's really important for you guys to know out there, and patients as well. If you're on antibiotics, Coumadin, blood thinners, any drugs or anything like that, or especially herbs as well, make sure you disclose this stuff and this information to your therapist, because this can cause rupture of the tendon, especially if they go too hard. And it could be spontaneous rupture. If you look on the back of like those antibiotics, there can be spontaneous tendon rupture. And guess what? If you're tight in your arm and you go have spontaneous tendon rupture, and then the therapist is working on you, guess who's going to get the blame? It's going to be your therapist, not the drug, because that's just the society we live in. So that's a different story for a different day, if you can go down the ethics and stuff like that and the concept of suing people, but that's not why we're here right now. We're just here to tell you that, one, how harder is not better, for neurologic reasons, and really it's just not going to serve your patients long term. So if we talk about soft tissue work, we're really trying to elicit a therapeutic response that heals bad tissue, but in order to get down to the bad tissue, you also have to affect good quality tissue. If you're going to hit good quality tissue hard, you're going to do some damage. And then of course there's that neurologic effect that occurs as well. So one of the last things that is important to recognize in patients is, and people out there, is the psychosocial or the biopsychosocial model of patients thinking that harder is better, or certain techniques are better, and if you push on them really hard, they somehow get better anyway. And usually that is just a great indication, and we all know, I believe at this point in time, how powerful our mind is and how it's connected to our body. And if you believe something's going to work for you, whether that be positive or negative, or you don't think it's going to work for you, I should say, usually that is the outcome that we derive. So if you think a therapy is going to work and that your therapist needs to push really, really hard, then to get the result, then you're probably going to believe that you get that result, therefore you get that result, if that makes sense. Likewise, if you come to see me, for example, and I'm pushing firm, but I'm not hard, but I'm not too soft, and I'm giving you the right amount, at least what I think is the right amount of dosage and treatment without exacerbating you, and you're like, well, why is he going so light? I don't think that's effective. You're probably not going to go think that it is effective. So that concept of harder is better is really not always so valid, but it comes from a lot of that research that said, hey, deeper stimulation to the receptors within the muscle bellies stimulate better rehealing. One of the things that soft tissue does for you, as I said before, is really just help tissues heal faster, and really stimulate them. And one of the things I think is really, really important to note is like how the power of touch and how it releases hormones, and how effective it can be for just your movement system and freeing up other things like your movement. And that brings us to another concept of scar tissue. So, which is, here is where the research is. If you are a practitioner, or if you have a therapist working on you guys and they say scar tissue, it is not scar tissue. We thought it was, yes, can there be scar tissue? There can be functional scar tissue. There could be non-functional scar tissue within the body. But if you think, as I said before, it takes about 1,400 pounds of force to deform a tissue 1 millimeter. Do you really think you're going to be breaking down a ton of scar tissue? And a lot of therapists will use that term. Hey, we're breaking down scar tissue. You got a lot of scar tissue in there. Have you ever noticed, like, oh yeah, that thing's not moving right? And I'm not saying that it's not moving right and they don't have good hands, but I think what we're learning, well, I know what we're learning it now is that it's not really about scar tissue. It's really just about the neuromuscular retraining and the training of the nervous system and re-stimulating the nervous system and pretty much pressing Control-Alt-Delete to allow those tissues to fire and function properly. So that's kind of what soft tissue actually does. If you really think about it, yes, we allow it to lengthen and elongate, but by us putting our hands on a patient, what we're doing is we're literally changing the sensory input to that system. We're really changing how that system functions. So if you can imagine your computer, right? Imagine if your computer glitches on you and you're like, oh man, this Microsoft Word thing isn't working. It's failing. I'm just going to press Control-Alt-Delete or close the program and reset it. And that's what we're doing. So when we do soft tissue work, we're not necessarily breaking down scar tissue. Yes, we're promoting healing. We're stimulating receptors. But all these receptors are, guess what? Feeding into the neurologic systems that allow our brain to process that input. And that input, if it's faulty and not moving well, then guess what we do? We reset it and we re-stimulate it, and then hopefully the system is at Control-Alt-Delete. Now, my opinion at this point in time, is, and of course, I'll probably be wrong in, another couple of years after another research comes out, is that I think you should exercise either before or after that period of time. Because if your body is pressing Control-Alt-Delete and you reset the system and it feels better and it's performing better and now it has like this blank sensory input, it's like you want to start stimulating it with the right stimuli. Well, what is the right stimuli? It's freaking exercise, guys. It's not that hard. And that's what the Graston Technique is. And I'm not saying that Graston Technique is more superior, but the difference between Graston Technique and other soft tissue techniques basically is that Graston promotes some sort of rehabilitation after the neurosensory stimuli, right? Whereas a lot of other soft tissue works do not. Meaning, if I tell you to lay down and I'm going to do trigger point work, or you have a buddy push onto your mid back and say, oh, hit that knot, hit that tight spot, and you do, but you just don't exercise it after, like, what do you think is going to happen? It's just going to come right back. So the whole concept of, muscle work is not necessarily to go harder and to make it, hurt. It's really just to reset the system so that the patient feels better. That's one of the reasons why they also feel better, is you're literally breaking down that sensory input and allowing people to build up that motor output. So let's talk about that real quick. As I said before, the Control-Alt-Delete is the sensory input. So imagine if you're banging on the computer board or clicking the mouse and it's like not working. The sensory is not working that well. And then like 2 seconds, you just give it a second and you're like, oh man, I can't touch the computer. It's like messed up. I'm not a techie guy, so I'm probably screwing this up for somebody out there. So sorry about that. But imagine if you're on Microsoft Word, you're clicking, and then finally, like, it's just not working. And then you start typing and it's just not working. And then like you just leave it a second and then it starts typing. So what we do is we press Control-Delete, we reset the system, and then finally, when you start typing, it starts programming exactly the way it should. And that's the difference between sensory input, motor output. So good sensory input to the system, good perception of what happens within the system will equal good motor output, if that makes sense to you guys. So it should make sense. I mean, and that's what happens when you get injured, really. If you think about, if you ever sprain an ankle, what happens is that you end up tearing some of the tissues on. It could be a major tear, it could be a micro tear. Either way, let's just talk about you hurting your soft tissue work, and you're hurting your soft tissue. And once you hurt that soft tissue, you're disrupting fibers, you're disrupting sensory end organs, these little fibers and receptors that are embedded with each individual ligament and within the soft tissue itself. And so now you're at more risk for injury again in the future because you need to rebuild those sensory stimuli. And that's kind of how soft tissue works, is like we need to stimulate these receptors that have been broken down. But if you go too hard, you're damaging some of the healthy receptors that are in there. And that's what's awesome is like about rehab, is that it helps retrain and reprogram that input. And so if you've ever sprained your ankle or broken your ankle, you'll notice that what's happening is like your balance ability is so bad after. I believe the research on that is like, I think if you sprain your ankle and you don't rehab it, you're at 4 times more likely to sprain your ankle for the next 4 years or something crazy like that. And I can speak from this personally. I rolled my ankle in chiropractic college, and I was too busy because hey, that's what happens when you're busy doing chiropractic stuff and you're like, hey, I'm young, I can get over this. I can tell you, I do not have the same balance on my left as on my right, and I can tell you for sure that it is affecting my hip mobility and all the things up or down the chain, and it can. So if you and when you see a therapist, make sure that you're incorporating some sort of exercise at home or in the office or both, and maybe you're doing some of the more complex stuff with the therapist with some cueing and some ideas. And if you don't know what cueing is, it just means like, hey, they're helping you kind of get into that position a little bit easier so that you can really feel the muscle turn on or fire. And so really we're just talking about, with soft tissue work, stimulating and re-stimulating tissue to fire and work and perform properly. And that's it. One of the other things I like to talk to my patients about, and this should be our last concept here, is the concept of sticking. So if you think about 2 muscles that sit next to each other, or one muscle sits on top of the other, and this goes for nerves as well, and this is a different topic that's called neuromobilization or nerve flossing, and that is brought up by actually a really good practitioner, Michael Shacklock, which I've studied some of his stuff, and I'm actually reading his book currently again because I feel like I lost some concepts on that. But the concept of sticking is, we're not breaking down scar tissue, as I said before. Then what are we doing, guys, right? What are we doing other than like, okay, we're re-stimulating fibers, we're starting to actually get those things to heal, we're bringing more oxygen and blood flow to that area, which is great, and that usually happens within about a 24 to 1 week period. Usually initially you don't have as much blood flow. It seems like you would think that, but it's actually, research is showing that it's about 24 hours to 5 days to 1 week later that you still have better blood flow. So that's why going once a week to a doc or a therapist is actually really good for you, is because you'll have constant blood flow for more than a week, and then you go back and see them again a week later and you're getting re-stimulated with that blood flow. So it's the whole concept. Let's get back to the concept, is sticking. Sticking is allowing muscles that are next to each other, adjacent to each other, on top of each other, on the bottom of each other, nerves, things that have to glide and slide next to each other, right? So if you think about scar tissue, and I know I'm painting a picture, I just kind of bashed it before, but if you think about scar tissue as this thing that creates muscles from sliding past each other, That's it, right? Imagine if you had one muscle on top of another muscle. And one of the examples I like to use is, imagine cellophane wrap, or I don't know, plastic wrap or saran wrap, whatever you want to call it. Fold the saran wrap over each other. And now what does it do? It kind of sticks, and you have to man, I'm frustrated with this. I'm going to throw this out. That's pretty much like two muscles sticking together. But imagine if you take that same plastic wrap and you put a little bit of soap and water on that plastic wrap, and then you fold it over. And then what happens, right, from there? The tissues, or the cellophane in this case, or plastic wrap, whatever you want to call it again, is gliding or sliding past each other. So that means there's good movement. Now there's, of course, nerves that go in there, and other structures like, your blood vessels and lymph and all these other things that need to happen. So you want to have good glide and slide between these two, and you don't want muscles to, quote, stick to each other. And so soft tissue is really great at that, because it allows some of the unsticking to happen of these tight muscles, and it creates a lot more mobility. But the primary thing, as I said before, even though it's unsticking you, it's still more neurologic, because it doesn't really matter, guys, if you have scar tissue, if you have this. It's really more about the function and the patterns, the movement patterns that actually occur, that create or don't create pain for you. So if that makes any sense to you guys, we really covered a lot on soft tissue work, and this is just something I'm pretty passionate about. I really spend a lot of time educating my patients, and if you're a practitioner, I would urge you guys to spend a little bit more time talking about why you're doing the soft tissue and what you expect to get out of it. And if you're a patient or somebody like that, or somebody who's looking to improve your soft tissue health, whether you're an athlete, a professional athlete, weekend warrior, or just somebody who's tight and trying to get to activity, think about what it's doing for you. It's helping you recover via more blood flow, and it's really helping your biomechanics and your neurology more so than you think it is, quote, breaking down scar tissue. And then when you complement this stuff with rehab and proper exercise patterns and patterning of proper movement, man, that's where people go from the one level to the next level. It's okay, somebody's in pain, and you just massage their neck, and you're like, oh, that felt so much better. And then you massage their neck, and versus another person, you massage their neck, and then you do soft tissue work, and you're like, oh my god, that feels so much better. And then you're like, well, now we're going to add some exercise. And so you're really doing, you're hitting it both on a strength level, a flexibility level, mobility level. You're talking about the physiology and the neurology that occurs within all of this. And so now you really have this whole complete game between rehab and flexibility and mobility, like I just said. So it's really a different way of approaching it. And if you're just kind of out there on your massage bed as a client, and you're just kind of getting pounded on, and somebody's like, oh, you're putting me in pain, and you're starting to sweat, and you're stimulating the sympathetic response, I would urge you guys, first of all, one, speak up. Definitely speak up, because you shouldn't be in pain. This should be helpful and relieving, and there is some stress management that goes into it as well, and I think that's important to recognize as well. So there's so many different ways to approach soft tissue work, but these are kind of the ways that I do that in my office, and some of the things that I see not only patients come in for, but practitioners that fail. And I don't mean they're failing in business or they're failing, but why is this one guy not getting results, or this one girl not getting results? Then they come to me and they do get results. I didn't do anything much different other than maybe not go as hard, and maybe give them a couple of exercises that they can do, and that's about it. So just when you are getting some soft tissue work, don't let them tell you, hey, we're going to hit you as hard as we can, and just speak up, because you want to make sure that whatever soft tissue you're getting, whether it's a therapy, whether it's physiotherapy, whether it's manual therapy, whatever, ART, Graston, myofascial release, or just a general massage, that you're actually benefiting from it and that it's actually comfortable and that you feel good doing it. Because what's the point of doing something if it just, hurts you and it's not allowing you to recover faster? Because that's my thought is, just get everybody to be, get better faster, as fast as they can. And I don't think anybody wants to get, better slower, right? So that's my thought on soft tissue work, and that's how I go about treating it in my office. So that's it for this episode, guys. So if you have any questions, feel free to check us out on our website. You can go to unlockedhuman.com, or you can visit my other website, SanDiegoSpineandSport.com. Feel free to shoot me an email if you have any questions, and thanks again for stopping by. Hopefully this helped you, and if you did find this valuable, please make sure you subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you guys for the next episode. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Unlocked Human podcast. Learn more at unlockedhuman.com. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Unlocked Human.